All right, YouTube, as of today, a federal court ruled that Oklahoma's ban on gay marriage is unconstitutional, following in the footsteps of Utah, where we saw that several weeks ago, uh, under, again, the exact same principle of equal protection under the law. The Christians are, of course, very upset over this. Some people are rejoicing. I'm sure most of the people in Oklahoma are either ambivalent or upset. It's an extremely red, extremely religious, right-wing state. It's one of the most overwhelmingly Republican states in the entire union. I found this slightly funny because just yesterday I was on that Verilyn Politics user's channel, and she had another video that was basically saying that my idea about gay marriage gaining a quicker pace now and becoming either legal in more states or federally legal would not come true. And then this comes out the next day, so I found that hilarious. Um, I told people some time ago, we've reached the tipping point in the United States at which the majority of people, and this ties in not just with libertarianism, but also the growing number of independents. There was a report just today that a record number of Americans consider themselves independent. They no longer consider themselves Democratic or Republican. They consider themselves independent for the same reasons, again, I already stressed, which is people looked at Bush and Obama, determined they were both corrupt, and decided they no longer had enough faith in either party to truly, fully endorse them. I think this is a good thing for the United States. Whether it leads to a third party, the reform of one or both of the other parties, I think this is a good thing. There is a growing libertarian sentiment in the Western world. There's also growing nationalism in some areas, including in the United States. But it's mainly people in this country have come to the conclusion that because they've observed the government being corrupt for so long and at such a high level, they would rather limit the government. A fool could have told you that many years ago, that that was a good idea to do. Even a total fool could have told you that. People spent many decades trying to limit the spread of government, and sometimes unsuccessfully. And then people observe that in the modern age. They wake up one morning, they realize the government's spying on everything that they do, that the government is cracking down on liberty. There's another thing about net neutrality right now circulating around about a court striking down part of the net neutrality laws. We've got a lot of problems, and one of the solutions that's been offered and has taken off and more people are now endorsing is simply we need to limit the government more. We need to respect the Constitution, which was put there for a reason. And that's something I think that this other user and other people, not just within the United States, but especially in other nations, don't understand. We are governed by a constitution. The Constitution is the highest law, for better or for worse. Whether individual aspects of it have been good or bad, that is what we use for our legal system. That governs the other laws that can and cannot be made, how they can be enforced, and so forth. That's the way this country operates. Generally, I think it's worked fairly well. I think that in some ways the Constitution isn't expansive enough. And it's not a right or a left-leaning issue. It's simply a matter of treating people with respect, treating people with some level of equality and fairness, and respecting these basic rights that the founders realized people inherently had, whether it was gifted by a creator or some innate nature or a cosmic force, or whether it's simply the best way to go from a subjective point of view. That is what we use. When I look at people making moralist arguments, particularly people, again, noting this user's content, particularly people within the Tea Party that are some of the most bigoted, vile right-wingers, these fake libertarians, when I see them attacking this issue, I believe they don't understand the Constitution. They're letting their religion, in a theocratic manner, override their love for the country. Which again, as I've mentioned, is straight out of the eugenics era, straight out of the temperance movement, the late 1800s, early 1900s, early wave of anthropology, if you can call it that, very amateur anthropology and cultural anthropology in theory. It comes straight out of that era, and that's when things started going wrong for the country. Before that, largely life was peachy keen in the United States. Things were going fairly well up until after the Teddy Roosevelt sort of trust buster era. Then things started falling apart because the government kept cracking down on people. It got to the point where at one time, Bonnie and Clyde, who were going around killing police officers, were hailed as national heroes. They're still folk heroes to this day. They were cop killers. Because people realized that the Justice Department, the FBI, the Hoover, and all of these people were worse than the criminals, that they had become criminals themselves. We are seeing that again. The same sort of go out into the wilderness and make your own way, possibly even explore foreign lands, the sort of self-made image of that early era is slowly returning, because we have similar situations today where people feel like they can't trust the police. They certainly can't trust the politicians and their lawyers. They can't even trust their neighbors in some sense, because we've got this overarching fear of these terrorists and so forth that we've got to give up a bunch of freedom to combat them. My own personal thought is we should just pit bomb these countries back to the Stone Age and be done with it. Again, not a warmonger, not genocidal or anything, but if the Saudi government is going to continue to fund terrorists, we should just bomb their little palace over there, kill the royal family, have their heads on pikes, and be done with it. And then people can establish whatever theocratic state or democracy or whatever that they want. And probably you'd see these terrorists dropping like flies because their own people would start butchering them. The moderates would. We saw that in Libya, by the way, when the moderates stormed several compounds and burned them to the ground and killed many hundreds or thousands of Islamist extremists. But I'm completely digressing into that diatribe. As for the gay marriage issue, it's simply equal protection under the law. Really, if you respect the Constitution and the country, whether you think it's founded by Jesus or founded by Masons or whatever, you've got to understand you can't legally discriminate against a group who is doing no harm simply because you don't agree with their lifestyle. I extend this further. I say things like polygyny and polygamy will eventually be legal. I believe that. I believe that because I can see into the future. No, I'm just joking. I can believe that because I can understand that the same rational argument can be made for that. And this is actually one of the things that the religious folks say in opposition to gay marriage. They say, well, the next step will be polygamy. And I sit here and I say, that doesn't sound so bad. I'm not a polygamist, but if other people want to be polygamous, it doesn't bother me. It has nothing to do with me. It doesn't affect my life one way. Not at all. If multiple adults want to enter into a state contract of marriage the same way that a so-called normal couple or a gay couple or whatever would do that, who am I to care? It doesn't affect me one bit. If they want to pay more on taxes and get a marriage penalty, get fucked 3 ways by a marriage penalty, no less, let them do it. More power to them if they really care about each other that much. But really, people need to leave each other alone and stop worrying about what other people are doing. I fail to see how anybody can truly think this is a bad idea. Simply leaving others alone, if they're not hurting anyone. I mean, if they're chopping off people's heads or doing some crazy shit or abusing their kids or sacrificing animals to the moon god or something, that's a different scenario. But if these people are largely, if they're just living within society's laws anyway, and the only difference between them and a so-called normal group of people is they happen to be homosexual, they happen to be polygamous, they happen to smoke pot or something, it does not affect any other living human being. It doesn't affect any other living thing. It means nothing. It's a choice that they have made, or a condition that they have, or something that they want to do, or in the case of homosexuality, the way they were born, or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect you. It's not going to suddenly cause your Bible to burst into flames and Jesus to fall from the sky screaming in pain. It's not going to cause the cosmos to collapse in on themselves. It's not going to do anything. It means nothing. It's just what they desire to do, how they are either genetically programmed to operate or culturally programmed to operate. Or they simply made that choice and they said, well, I want to smoke pot. Or they said, well, I'm gay. I can't force myself to like a woman. Or some lesbian says, well, I can't force myself to like a man. And to these people, they say, well, you can choose to be gay. Choose to be gay. Well, then, if you're straight, well, then you choose to be gay. If it's so easy to do it, why don't you try it? Maybe you'll end up liking cocks more than vaginas. I'm straight. I can't force myself to be gay. Much as I would like to have this apparent happy power that a certain subset of the population has, I can't look at pictures of dudes with their dongs and get turned on. I can't do it. It doesn't work for me because I'm straight. I can say to people, yes, I'm gay, but it doesn't make me actually gay. Any more than these people who have been forced to live in the closet for decades, they can come out and they can say, no, I like women, I'm straight, but they're not straight, they're gay. They were always gay to begin with. Another misconception is that because gay marriage is being legalized and gay rights is in full effect, another thing that's happening is people are saying, well, the number of gays is increasing drastically because of this. It's not. The number of people who are homosexual or bisexual or whatever is the same. It's not increasing, it's not decreasing, it's a certain subset of the population. The ratios probably hasn't changed for a million years. The difference is now these people are open about their lives because in most parts of the country, at least, they don't have to worry about having eggs thrown at their house or having someone burn a cross on their lawn. They don't have to worry about someone trying to hang them as a sodomite. And in many states now, and now one more state after the stay has been granted, so it's going before the Supreme Court, just like the Utah case. And we all know how it's going to turn out. It's going to become federally legal. It will, or they'll take a loose view and they'll fiddle around with it somehow or refuse to take the case. But they probably will. I think it's about time. These people no longer have to worry as much, at least, about things like death threats, so they're more open about it. Especially online. When you look online, a lot of people say, well, you just have a persona on the internet. I've had people claim this about me too. Well, you don't act that way in real life. Online, a person is more safe. Most of the people they're talking to probably are hundreds of miles away. So yes, people let themselves be themselves online more than they do in real life. How is this a bad thing? It's a way of communication. It's no different than if you're talking on the phone or you go on public access TV, really. And when you think about it, it's just more interactive and more hooked into more people use it now than watch TV, I'm sure. TV's going the way of the dinosaur because it's so fucking boring because all these corporations keep buying up the channels. But on this issue, I feel great. I don't have to be gay to understand the Constitution protects people who happen to be homosexual. As for the traditional sanctity of marriage argument, all the ma-culture, ma-sanctity, ma-traditions, if you want traditional marriage, you have to allow child brides. You have to allow, because there were child brides when this country was young. You have to, extramarital affairs shouldn't be a problem because people used to bang their slaves. They used to have mistresses of both genders, by the way. There were many infamous cases of this. Homosexuality wasn't necessarily even really frowned upon in the early Americas. So, certainly much less than it is nowadays. There wasn't any propaganda about it. They didn't hang these people. Even if they felt the Bible condemned it, they probably, as long as the person was a decent human being, they probably didn't care. They pretended not to know. Any of the founding fathers could have been bisexual. You wouldn't even know. Benjamin Franklin, I've pointed this out before. I'll say this for the last time, I hope, was a member of the Hell Devils Club, or the Hellfire Club, whichever you want. I've heard it referred to both. He used to have orgies in basements and get drunk and carouse with men and women. And they claim, well, he was an agent sent in to sort of spy on these groups. That doesn't sound very Ben Franklin-y to me. No, I think he did that on purpose. I think he liked it. Just like when he was over in France, he fucked every whore in the city. He was banging them in the alleyways. He was dragging them upstairs in a half-drunken daze. This is not a man with what you would consider modern, so-called traditional biblical morals. So that's about all I've got to say about that. I'm happy about the ruling. The issue's basically dead at this point. It's already flooding the country. We've got a constitution for a reason. It doesn't matter if you don't like gays any more than it matters. I don't like Christians, but I'm not trying to endeavor to take away your right. If you're in church and you don't want, if the church doesn't want to perform a gay marriage, nobody's going to make you. Go ahead. Only perform straight marriages. No one's going to force you. It would be illegal to force you to do so. That's your First Amendment right. You have every right to do that. But as far as the state goes, the state, which can perform marriages, has to abide by the Constitution. The same thing that protects your guns, the same thing that protects the sanctity of the states in regards to certain legal issues that the federal government cannot meddle in. The same thing that protects you from having soldiers quartered in your home, and it protects your right to speak freely, and it protects journalists, and it protects the media, and so forth. It protects these people's right to be treated with the same dignity as any other adult human beings that are consenting to such a state arrangement. It doesn't affect religious marriages whatsoever. Religious marriage is a ritual, by the way. It still involves the same state contract. Religious marriage is merely the ritualism around that, just sort of sanctifying it by Jehovah, Jesus, Allah, whatever it happens to be. If you want traditional marriage, then you're also going to have to tell the Hindus, well, you have to have a Christian marriage, and tell the Muslims they'll have to do the same thing. It doesn't make any sense. This country was not founded on Christian principles. You can hear John Adams say that, the Treaty of Tripoli. But most people don't want to look that up, don't even know it exists. That's about all I've got to say about this, and I'm happy that the fundamentalists are losing, because really their bigotry, at this point, it just gets old after a while, listening to these people whine. Oh, the good old days, back when we used to beat black people with a stick and tie them to a tree. Oh, the good old days when women were barefooting in the kitchen. The good old days, no one was an atheist, nobody was gay. If they were, we hung them. We used to be good, upstanding Christian citizens. If you go back to the Revolutionary era, people were less religious than they are now, actually. You won't find a single founder who is quoted as supporting organized religion, really. None of them were. They didn't go to church. Instead, they went to the State House and they carved out the Constitution and helped you along with these rights that you're now trying to deny to gay couples. So it's good news, I think, for the United States, good news for everyone. That's